Greetings and salutations, my friend. This is going to be a pretty short video, but do not let its shortness convince you that this video is of less importance for any reason. Actually, I think this is a very, very important video, and I'm mentally ill, right? And a lot of people, when they meet me, when they talk to me, or even when they watch my videos, a lot of the time don't realize that, or even if they know it, they forget it, because it's so easy to forget that, because I may seem very high functioning, and in some ways I am, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I do have a mental illness. I have been struggling with anxiety and panic attacks since very early childhood, since basically since I was 3 years old, which is very early to experience panic attacks and anxiety attacks at that point, but I did, right? And I struggled with depression through most of my teenage years and through most of my 20s, and through most of my 20s I also have struggled with trauma, or even earlier than that, if you take into consideration everything that has happened from childhood trauma related to death and funerals, to bullying, to sexual assault, to the surgery. I think it all sort of piled up on top of each other to create this traumatic experience that I have to live with. And as someone who has lived with that for a very, very long time now, let me tell you something, and this is something that I learned throughout my life, which I think is one of the most important things I have ever learned. So if you're watching this video and you're someone who has been struggling with your mental health in one form or another, because, you know, I think that mental illness can take on many different forms. And I think there's a lot of stigma around it in society, which I think is completely unnecessary, because I think we should be treating mental health just as we are treating our physical health. But anyway, the theme of this video is that being mentally ill does not necessarily mean you have to be unhappy, or that you are unhappy. And what I mean by that, it's not necessarily, you know, a lot of the time we have this imagined picture of someone who is like mentally ill, but they was like, no, I'm fine, I'm happy, alright, like this sort of facade that, you know, a lot of people who are struggling with depression or bipolar disorder or any sort of mental illness really will put this sort of facade like, no, I'm fine, you know, I'm happy, right? This is not what I'm talking about, even though, you know, some people do that, but I'm talking about genuine happiness in life. And, you know, I said previously in one of my first videos on this channel is that happiness is something temporary, and we shouldn't be chasing temporary things. We should be chasing something that is more lasting. And, you know, I still agree with it 100%. I don't think happiness is something we should be just blindly chasing at all costs. I think this is exactly what makes us unhappy. I think that real happiness comes from the fact that you just accept things for what they are, you go with the flow. What's most important is that your life has meaning, that your life has purpose, because once those two factors are met, you are more likely to be happy. You know, like, I don't ever chase happiness in form of like material goods, although yes, they can also bring you like this sort of temporary happiness, and you know what, I think it has a value too. I just don't think it is the highest value, because a lot of the time people assume when I talked about that is that I don't put on any value on happiness or temporary happiness or material things. No, I think they do have its value and they do have its role, right? It's not the most important thing in life. It is not what's going to make you happy in the long term. But when it comes to this genuine happiness, a lot of us who are struggling with our mental health, we sometimes, especially when we're young, have this tendency to assume that this is over, we are doomed to being unhappy, we're doomed to being miserable. And I want to tell you, that's not true. Here's the thing, you don't have to be unhappy. No, you see, I look at it a bit differently. I think of something like mental illness as a challenge in life that we are facing, right? But the thing about challenges is that I think that challenges are something you're supposed to overcome. You're supposed to better yourself, you're supposed to get better at something, and you're supposed to get better overall. And you know, truth be told, even if you're unable to see it in this moment, think about your life in the last 2 years. Have you been sad at all time? Have you ever had some moments of joy or happiness? Probably. Even if 90% of it was shit, you have had those good moments, those good days, good memories you have formed. If not, well, I think there are very few individuals who will never experience that, but like the vast majority of us, 96% or maybe more, will form those good memories. And you know, this really dawned on me that as a mentally ill person, I shouldn't be feeling sorry for myself, or I shouldn't be really convincing myself that I am doomed to be sad or doomed to be miserable. Because a lot of the time when I think of mental illness, we automatically assign all the negative feelings to it, right? And sadness is absolutely one of them. One of the major negative feelings that we assign to mental illness, right? Like mentally ill people are either sad or insane, they're mad, they're angry, they're this and that, right? But we never hear mentally ill people are happy, you know? And, you know, I have worked with people with physical disability, and let me tell you something, that is one hell of a challenge to live with, whether it is something you acquired later in life, or if it's something you've been born with and lived like this all the time. And you know, there are many degrees of your physical functionality, right? How able-bodied are you? How disabled are you? And one thing I notice is that among many individuals who have physical disability, they are very happy individuals, actually. And I think that having this sort of experience in my life is really sort of an enrichment of it, because you see that struggle is not the end of it, you know? And the thing is that at the end of the day, in that sense, I don't think that physical disability and mental illness are really that different. So, as a mentally ill person, I want you to know that you don't have to be unhappy. You can find happiness despite the mental illness. That's what your life with mental illness should really be like. To find happiness despite all the obstacles that life has thrown at you, whatever challenges you are facing. Overcome them and find that happiness. And it will not be lasting. You will have your bad days, you will have your moment of sadness, you will probably have your moments of confusion and anxiety and depression and panic and all this negative shit, right? And I have those moments and I have those days, right? And in that moment when they are happening, it may feel like this is what I'm like, this is what defines me, but it's really, really not. And try to compare it to your physical health, right? If you're down with, let's say, flu, and you have a fever, you're coughing, or your muscles are aching, you're just feeling horrible. You stay in your bed, you feel weak, you feel sick, and well, usually in that moment you don't really think like, oh, this is what I am, this is who I am. I'm weak, sick, or I have fever, I can't get out of bed, this is what I am, this is what defines me. Truth is, no, this is just the state you're in at that moment, and it will likely be over. So those periods of intense anxiety or panic or depression or trauma, they're not lasting. You know, even if your condition is chronic, and my condition is chronic too, you know, try to focus on all those spaces in between those episodes. Because I think that's when you really find yourself. And when you're focusing on that, I think of it as my real timeline of who I am, whereas those episodes of anxiety and depression and traumatic flashbacks, I think of those as sort of like interruptions in my process that stop me from doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Sort of just like how the flu can stop you from doing whatever you were doing, right? You may be, I don't know, you were doing some repairs in your kitchen, whatever, something you're working on, right? And when you're done with the flu, you can't do that job, right? And then you're back on doing what you're supposed to be doing once you're healthy, once you're, you know, everything's fine. And, you know, I realized that if I think the same way of anxiety and depression and all of that, it's really not that bad. Those are just interruptions in my timeline that happen and will happen. I accept that they happen and that they will happen. And when they do happen, I acknowledge that. Like, I'm not well right now, but I know that I will be better, and that this very moment doesn't define me. And even though I have feelings of intense sadness or sometimes even apathy, because, you know, when I'm feeling sad, it's not that bad. When I'm really, really depressed, I don't feel anything at all. Sadness isn't really that bad, you know, it reminds you you're alive, you're a human. Sadness is a normal feeling. Well, let's not pathologize that, right? It can have this pathological element to it, but sadness in and of itself is not pathological, it's completely normal. Yes, I do have those moments, but outside of that, this is not who I am all the time. Just like I'm not an individual with a flu at all time. I'm really not sure if this piece of information will serve anyone else but me. Maybe it's just, you know, I'm the only individual who this type of thinking helps. But, you know, I think we humans have a lot of traits that we share. So even if this piece of advice will not work for everyone, I'm pretty sure that there are some who will relate. And I really hope that this video will help someone feel better about themselves, about their life, about their mental illness as well. And be happy. You know, just be happy. Anyway, take good care of yourself, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao.